Hello, and welcome to Beyond Biotech, the weekly podcast from Labiotech. I'm Dylan Hussain, and this is episode 140. This week, I had the pleasure to talk to Dr. Klaus Dugi from Vandria, a biotech developing mitophagy inducers that rejuvenate cells by restoring mitochondrial health. Dugi and his team are doing cutting-edge work in mitochondrial therapeutics, and indeed, the company name Vandria even comes from the combination of Van, for being on the vanguard, and Dria, from mitochondria. I hope you enjoy my discussion with Vandria's CEO, Klaus Dugi. Klaus, your journey through medicine and pharma has been pretty extensive. Can you share a little bit about your background and the career path you had moving up to and leading up to Vandria?
Sure, my pleasure. So I'm a physician by training. After medical school, I spent 4 years in doing basic research as a postdoctoral fellow at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda in the US in atherosclerosis and molecular biology. Then came back to Europe and spent 6 years at Heidelberg University Hospital. I received my training there in internal medicine, endocrinology, and diabetology. And I'm actually still an adjunct professor of medicine, and I teach students a few days every semester in Heidelberg still. And but then I joined Boehringer Ingelheim for almost 15 years. I started the diabetes area there, but later also was for almost 6 years the global head of medicine and chief medical officer. I had the privilege and luck to help develop and get approved and launch a number of medicines that help a lot of patients these days. Two of those your listeners may be familiar with. One is called Jardiance. It's the first diabetes drug that showed a reduction in cardiovascular events. And the other one is actually now been marketed by AbbVie. It's called Skyrizi or risankizumab, which is an immunology drug. I also have received experience in the more commercial area of pharmaceutical industry. I was 2 years the general manager for Boehringer Ingelheim in the UK and Ireland. And then in 2017 moved to Switzerland. I joined Ferring Pharmaceuticals Executive Committee as the Chief Medical Officer. And now for the last 4 years, I'm with Vandria, the Chief Executive Officer, but currently also the Chief Medical Officer. I sit also on a couple of supervisory boards in Boston and in Copenhagen, but by far the most of my time I spent at Vandria.
So you've had a little bit of experience then at top pharma companies. What sort of lessons did you take from working there that you can apply now at a smaller biotech like Vandria?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's quite a few. I think on the top of my list would be it's all about the people. To have the right person in the right role that works to his or her best abilities, but also has the right soft skills. So passion for work, the agility that it takes, etc. So, and also to build a team that works well together. So that is diverse, that's complementary. And I think that's the key success factor, not only in pharma, that's going to be the same in large and small corporations, but that's where I also see one of my key roles as CEO to really put the right team together and make sure that everybody is engaged, wants to learn, wants to work together. So that will be on the top of my list. The second one that comes to mind is the importance of being a learning organization and also a learning individual, right? We all make mistakes. I'm a first-time CEO. I will make mistakes. I have made mistakes. It's important to learn from them and as an individual, but also as an organization. So we constantly, and that was started, or that I learned at Boehringer and Ferring, where you do regularly meetings where you say, what have we learned? What went well last year or in a certain project, and what can we do better next time? And I think, there's in quality, there's a formal process. It's called CAPA, so corrective action and preventive action. So if an organization makes a mistake or an individual, we have to be transparent. We have to be open. We have to have the right mistake culture. And correct the mistakes by openly talking about them, and then to prevent to making them again. So this way maybe would be in the top of my list. So the importance of people and being a learning organization.
Yeah, so you mentioned people, the learning, also a little bit of passion in there as well. You brought that to Vandria. What sort of gap are you looking to fill at Vandria? What's something that you can do that you couldn't do at these bigger organizations?
Oh, so you mean me individually? So yeah, as I just mentioned, I'm a first-time CEO, so I can help guide the organization. But we're a small team. We're currently 10 people, actually with 10 passports. So we're a very diverse team. We try to avoid topics like hierarchy, reporting lines as much as possible. So I really see myself as leading a team of a lot of equals. But yeah, I think I can bring this experience from having developed or helped to develop a number of compounds from early preclinical through clinical development, all the way to approval in the US and Europe and Japan and China, and then also to launching them together with commercial colleagues, market access colleagues. So I think I've learned a lot in those 18 years, and I'd like to hope I can take some of these lessons to Vandria and maybe increase the likelihood of success to a certain degree.
Let's talk a little bit about Vandria. Vandria focuses on mitochondrial therapeutics. Why are mitochondria such a crucial target for medicine today?
So it's something that we have learned a lot about in the past years, but we're still learning. If you look at the number of publications year over year, it's increasing every year because there's just so much science and so many new discoveries emerging. Why are mitochondria such a crucial target? Well, they are the powerhouses of our cells, right? So we need energy to live. Our cells need energy to function, to divide, to operate, to fend off inflammation, etc. And the mitochondria is the place where that energy or most of that energy is being generated. So that's why they're so crucial. And we have learned over time that there's a number of diseases where a less than perfect function of a mitochondrion can contribute to the progression of disease. And that's why there's been so much attention to mitochondria over the past few years as a potential tool to address age-related diseases by improving mitochondrial function. So it's a very exciting area. We're learning a lot. We have learned a lot, but there's also still a lot to learn going forward.
Your lead compound right now has been described as a Mitophagy inducer. Can you explain a little bit how that works and why it's really unique?
So, something that also I had to learn when I joined Vandria. I have to admit, I'd never heard of mitophagy. So that was something new, but it's actually an exciting process. So, and it's highly selective. So it's a process where the cell recognizes there is a mitochondrion or several of those that don't function as well anymore. We call them damaged mitochondria. And there is a machinery in place in the cells that can identify those damaged mitochondria, digest them, and replace them with healthy mitochondria. So leading in an overall improved mitochondrial function. It's important to understand that this is a very selective process. You often hear the concern, well, you don't want to eat up your mitochondria. What's it going to do to the energy in your cells? And for instance, with our mode of action, but I'm sure that's the same for others as well, is really selective. So if we treat a healthy cell with our compounds, we don't see much happening. If we give a toxin to these cells and then that damages mitochondria, then we see a dramatic increase in this mitophagy process, the identification of damaged mitochondria, the digestion, and the replacement with healthy mitochondria. And maybe one example to illustrate why this can be so important. For me, a seminal manuscript was from the Willem Bohr group in New York that was published in 2019. And they looked at mitochondria in the brains, obviously diseased patients with Alzheimer's disease, and compared them to age-matched healthy controls. And in the age-matched healthy controls, about 20% of the mitochondria in the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain where memory is being formed, etc., were damaged. In the Alzheimer patients, it was 80%. So you can appreciate that if we had a process that kind of prevents this mitochondrial damage from happening, or when it happens, it identifies it and replaces it with healthy mitochondria, should be a wonderful handle to prevent or treat early forms of Alzheimer's disease. And we now learn that this is applicable probably to a number of other diseases as well. So that's how it works in general. Why is our approach unique? I think that's an important question. And maybe I'll focus on two things there. First of all, we believe we're first in class and maybe only in class. So we have discovered a new target that has its own benefits, and to the best of our knowledge, there's no one else in the pharma who currently pursuing that. So that makes us unique. And the second part, I'm going to go back a little bit in time because I think it's important for your listeners to understand. So 35 years ago, the Human Genome Project was started. So the endeavor to really decipher our genes, our genetic material, the DNA, to hopefully have a handle to better understand where diseases arise and how we can treat them. And it was a hugely successful endeavor, and we understand a lot more now about genetic causes of diseases. And it helped us to develop gene therapies, etc. However, we also have to understand that we as individuals, we are born and we die with the same set of genes, right? So nonetheless, in our 20s and 30s and 40s, most of us, luckily, are quite healthy. But when we then get into our 60s and 70s and 80s, the risk dramatically increases for neurodegenerative diseases, for myopathies, for other disease states. And why is that? And we believe that energy plays a crucial role there. Our cells and the mitochondria, we talked about it a few minutes ago, generate energy that the cells need for all of their processes to fend off inflammation, etc. While we age, our cells go from a very efficient way of generating energy, ATP or adenosine triphosphate, in the mitochondria, to a less efficient way of energy production called glycolysis. And with that, we believe that there's less energy available to chaperone proteins, to fend off chronic inflammation, toxic protein aggregation, etc. And we kind of flip this switch back to the efficient way of energy production and help the cells and the tissues and the organs to fend off age-related diseases. And this may sound to listener, well, just a little bit of more energy, is that enough to treat diseases? But yes, so we have dramatic efficacy, admittedly, in animal models of disease. And if we have the time, I'll just give you two examples, maybe, which I find are very illustrative. So one way to look at cognitive function in animals is it's called the T-maze test. So you put a mouse at the bottom of the T, and the mouse crawls up, and you can go left or right. You take it back to the bottom of the T, and if the mouse remembers, I went left last time, I'm going to go right because I'm a curious animal, and I'm also looking for this elusive piece of cheese. So young mice remember this very well, and about 70% of the time they remember, I went left last time, I'm going to go right next time. Aged mice don't do that very well anymore. So they only remember in about 30% of the time. And if we treat those aged mice, there's no pharmacology, they're just old mice. If we treat them with very low amounts of our compound, they go back to 70%. So we had old mice learn exactly as fast and as well again as young mice. And the second example, and I mentioned Alzheimer's disease before, we studied a model that's called the 5X-FAD model. It has 5 human mutations that lead to the buildup of amyloid plaques and Alzheimer's disease-like phenotype in mice. And we treated those mice either with a vehicle or for 8 months with our compound, VNA318, and we see a dramatic reduction in the amyloid buildup and much improved cognitive function and behavior. So it seems like the mode of action is working very well and is sufficient to treat significant disease. For now in rodents, right? So we now have to show that this works as well in humans, and that's a big hurdle, as we know. But we're very excited that we're now at that stage that we can test our compound in humans and see whether we see efficacy, at least to a certain degree, like we saw in rodents. Sorry for the long answer, but I thought it was important to understand.
Maybe you can put it into a comparison with other approaches to these neurodegenerative diseases, to Alzheimer's. How does your approach compare to what's already out there on the market and what's been developed?
Yes, so we're excited because it looks, again, also from a clinical profile, our approach could be quite unique. So what has been made available to patients with Alzheimer's disease, I think maybe 20 years ago, it's called the choline esterase inhibitors. So it's a drug that helps to improve cognitive function in the short term. So after a few weeks, patients or caregivers will feel, functionality, cognitive function is improved. However, there's no disease-modifying effect. So the course of the disease isn't changed. So unfortunately, the cognitive function will decline in those patients over time. So it's like a short-term effect that is important, but it wanes over time because the disease progresses. On the other hand, the new treatments for Alzheimer's disease, the monoclonal antibodies against beta amyloid, the first two, actually, in fact, three have been approved in the US, and looks like the first one will also be soon approved in Europe. They don't have an immediate effect on cognitive function, but they have disease-modifying properties, so they slow the progression of the disease, they slow the progression of cognitive decline. But you have to wait 6 or 12 months to see that, even in a clinical trial. What we have shown in mice that we combine the two functions. So we have this immediate effect on cognitive function. So by improving brain metabolism, we can show improved memory and learning within 1 hour of treatment, because the improved energy seems to help that. But we've also, and I mentioned the 5x FAD model, we also show that we reduce inflammation to the brain, so neuroinflammation. We show that we reduce the aggregation of proteins like beta amyloid, and we improve mitochondrial function. So we should have the best of both worlds, hopefully, an immediate impact on or improvement of cognitive function, plus then slowing the disease progression. And we have evidence that again, works in rodents. It'll be a few years until we know whether that works in humans.
So we're talking here about aging, obviously in animal models now, but later in humans, aging and chronic disease. Maybe how does Vandria actually fit into this bigger conversation about longevity, around healthy life years? How do you fit into that, and not just talking about disease?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we get invited to longevity conferences, and there's specific venture capital funds who invest in longevity. We're trying to stay a little bit away from that. We really want to focus on disease, on age-related disease. So I mentioned how the energy level goes down, how we can hopefully treat age-related diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, like muscle wasting or myopathy. But if that's successful, then you also have to see, the earlier you treat these diseases, probably the better. And can we even go to a state where we do prevention of age-related diseases? And then we're getting a little closer to this topic of longevity. We really want to focus on health span, not on age span. But and maybe one more thought on that, because we always hear, society, insurers don't like to pay for prevention. It's actually not true. So to give an example, if someone has a high cholesterol level or bad cholesterol level, LDL, then a doctor may prescribe a cholesterol-lowering drug, even if there's no heart disease yet. But we know from the long-term studies that reduces the risk of heart disease by 30-40% or more. And because that's cost-effective, insurers will pay for it. If we can have such a similar biomarker for mitochondrial function or the energy level in the cells, and can show that if we intervene early, we can actually prevent the formation of diseases like Alzheimer's disease, then maybe society will find a way also to pay for that. So that's more the mid to long-term future. But for now, we really focus on age-related diseases and less on longevity.
Yeah, what about this bigger interest in mitophagy as a therapeutic strategy? How do you see that evolving, maybe not just at your company, but more broadly, right through the industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as I mentioned earlier, we have experienced some concern. Is that enough to really treat diseases? Is it safe? That's obviously, these are important questions, and that's why also you have to show the safety. So we are very happy when we received a year ago our toxicity studies, where you treat rats and dogs with very high doses. Rats we treated, for instance, with a 400-fold therapeutic dose, and it was safe. We didn't see any untoward findings, which is great. But as you said, we're not alone, and we are excited that we're not alone, because this is a big field and an important field, and it will benefit for more than one company to explore that. So to give you two examples, one company is called Mission Therapeutics. They were the first one to take a mitophagy inducer into clinical development, I think about a couple of years ago. A second example is a company called Mitochondria that was acquired by AbbVie a year and a half ago. They are also in phase 1, and we believe we're now the third one in clinical development with the mitophagy inducer. Importantly, these three companies induce mitophagy, improve mitochondrial function through different targets. So I think it's important because you could say that's more shots on goal, right? Because if you have three different modes of action, all hopefully leading to mitophagy, then the likelihood is bigger that one or two of them will be successful. And we believe that because there's a growing number of diseases where we realize that impaired mitophagy plays a role, there's certainly room for more than one or two companies. There's a number of diseases out there, and every single company can only pursue maybe one or two at the most three disease areas, and we can learn from each other, right? So I've been to two mitochondrial focused conferences, and we talk to each other, and which biomarker are you using, and how do you see that, and what's your experience with regulators? Sometimes people perceive pharmaceutical industry as only competitive, and we want to use elbows and be the first. It's actually much more collaborative than people think, and we want to learn from each other and exchange ideas and thoughts. Obviously, as long as it's not anti-competitive, but I think we can learn a lot from each other. So I'm excited that now there's three companies in the clinical development stage of a mitophagy inducer, and hopefully we learn a lot more over the next 1 or 2 years already.
Well, you just mentioned certain biomarkers that different companies are pinpointing. You've also talked a little bit about neurodegenerative disease and Alzheimer's. Are there particular biomarkers or patient populations where you think you're going to have the most impact or the first impact?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. So I had the privilege at Boehringer to start the area of translational medicine, where we try to use biomarkers to identify patient populations that have a better benefit risk profile than maybe an all-comer population. So it's a topic that's very close to my heart. It's not an easy topic. It's not so easy to measure mitochondrial function or impaired mitophagy, and that's why I said that's an area where we need to work together with others and learn from each other. But I also mentioned inflammation. That chronic inflammation is part of that aging process that we think we can tackle. So inflammatory biomarkers are, there we know a lot more. Like there's the non-specific one, which is called C-reactive protein. In Alzheimer's disease, there's one that we can measure in the cerebrospinal fluid that's called YKL-40. And that's what we want to learn. So we are planning to do a study with Harvard Medical School at Mass General Hospital, where we look at biomarkers in Alzheimer's patients and ideally learn and see other biomarkers that help us understand, is there a subpopulation? And I think that's where you were going with your question, that could have a better benefit risk profile with our drugs. And to give you maybe one more example, we're working with Professor Stephen Arnold at Harvard Medical School, and he looked at markers of mitophagy and autophagy in the cerebrospinal fluid of Alzheimer's patients, and it looked, and these are early data, that there is a population where these markers may be increased, and it could be that those are patients that would benefit more from a mitophagy inducers than maybe other people, because Alzheimer's, like so many, is a multifactorial disease, and not every patient will have exactly the same reasons why they develop Alzheimer's disease. But it's early days. We need to learn and want to learn a lot. And that's why it's so exciting also to work with experts like Professor Arnold from Harvard. And obviously, there's many more to learn together, to bring the best brains, if you will, to the table and discuss the clinical development strategy, the biomarkers, what is the right patient population to test in a clinical trial. So exciting days. We can't do it alone. We need the help from others, but we hope to learn a lot more in the years to come.
Well, exciting is one thing, but there's got to be some challenges there as well. It's not all plain sailing. It's not all easy to do. What sort of challenges are you facing there at Vandria right now? What's slowing things down?
A great question. Let me think of a few. So I already mentioned that some investors had concerns. Is this a mode of action that has enough efficacy? Could it have safety issues? And I already mentioned that we were very happy to see the clean toxicology data, and I have no doubt that the same is at Vision Therapeutics and Mitochondria, and otherwise they weren't allowed to go into the clinic. So I think that concern will diminish over time. A second one comes to mind. Our frontrunner is a CNS compound. We wanted to go into the brain, and for that it needs to be lipophilic, which means it's not so soluble in water. So you need to go through some hoops and find a formulation that it actually makes it soluble enough that it gets absorbed in the gut and gets into the brain and have activity there. And then we needed quite a bit of activity, and that was quite a challenge. And I think the third one comes back to an earlier question: what are the right biomarkers? How can we early show that we have that we move the needle on the process that we want to, chronic inflammation, mitochondrial function, protein aggregation? So we spent a lot of energy and had a strong focus over the last 12 months on developing the clinical biomarkers that help us to also early on identify what is the dose range we want to test in clinical trials. Is there signs that something is happening, which we need to get allowance to go into other trials, but also to attract further capital to move our development compounds further. So yeah, there's absolute challenges. So far so good. We now are in the clinic. That's exciting. But like in all areas in pharmaceutical development, it's never easy. But that makes it fun as well.
Yeah. I mean, you talked a little bit before about how there's people in the longevity field who are really interested in what you're doing, and maybe you're less interested in serving that particular market right now. What about another market that's really interested in these sort of therapies? That's in the performance enhancement, the resilience. Is there any scope for you to be working in those areas? Do you think you'll be offering therapies in that sort of space as well?
So I fully understand where you're coming from. When I say we give the cells the energy back that they need to treat age-related disease, you could also say, well, maybe if a muscle has more energy, maybe the person can jump higher or further or kick the ball harder. And that may be, but that's an area that we leave for others. We really want to focus on age-related diseases. It's a long journey, right? I think people sometimes underestimate it takes 10 to 15 years from idea generation to bring a new drug to market, and most of them fail on the way. So that's really where our focus needs to be, to attract the investment to move forward, to work with the right consultants, to identify the right patient populations, and hopefully help to address significant unmet medical need in patients that can benefit from that. So that's going to be our focus, and we leave the other topics to others.
So you're in the clinic now. What sort of milestones should we be looking for from Vandria right in the next couple of years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're currently in the first in-man study. So obviously the focus there is safety and tolerability. And so far, so good. We've dosed the first cohorts and haven't seen any untoward finding, which is in line with the toxicity data that I shared with you. But it's early days. So we've only started the trial a couple of months ago. So we still have a few months to go through. But the first outcome will be hopefully that our drug is safe and tolerated. Then we obviously look at pharmacokinetic parameters. Does enough of the drug get into the bloodstream that it can actually have an effect? And importantly, we are working, as mentioned, on biomarkers. So hopefully we can show that we switch on some genes in the mitochondria, that we switch off others, which are maybe pro-inflammatory, that we don't want to have. So that's the more midterm goal. The short-term goal is really safety and tolerability. And then next year we want to go also to really show efficacy. We're planning a study where we induce cognitive impairment by sleep deprivation. I was at JP Morgan in San Francisco, 9 hours time difference. I can tell you sleep deprivation does lead to cognitive impairment. And we want to show that our compound has benefit there. And then we want to go also in patients. And I mentioned the Alzheimer's study that we're doing. This is going to be a short-term study first, 4 weeks, maximum 3 months. Again, be driven by biomarkers. We will explore the cognitive function. I mentioned the dual mode of action. Hopefully, we can see something already in 4 weeks. We will look at the inflammatory biomarkers that you and I discussed just a few minutes ago. So that's really what we can be looking for in the next 2 to 3 years from Vandria.
Now, as well as Vandria, you mentioned there are a couple of other companies working in this domain as well. Is this eventually going to become, do you think, a mainstream approach in medicine, this mitochondrial medicine?
Mm-hmm. So I think it has the opportunity to become that. As I mentioned, it's early days. Neither Mission Therapeutics nor Mitochondria nor Vandria has yet had the chance to explore efficacy in longer term trials. But because we learn more and more about impaired mitophagy, mitochondrial dysfunction to be at the heart of so many diseases, I would be very surprised if we don't see some patient population at least that will benefit from that. And because it's such a general process that plays a role in so many cells, tissues, and organs, I think yes, if we can show also in longer term trials that there is efficacy, it is a safe approach, then I think it has a good chance to become a mainstream approach in medicine. That's why it's so exciting to be one of the first 3 companies that gets into the clinic. So very exciting times.
Let me draw you back out now and look at something a little bit of a bigger picture. You've worked at BI, you've worked at Ferring, you've worked at top pharma. Now you're in a smaller, more innovative biotech. Can you maybe tell me, how does the innovation process differ at a top pharma firm versus your 10-person firm now? What does it look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So obviously it's less formal, right? I remember as in any big pharma company, you sometimes have 2 or 3 day committee meetings where everything's being reviewed. You have a room full of 20, 30 people, and maybe everything has been said, but not by everyone yet. And so you can lose a lot of time. Decision making typically is slow in big pharma, and you always see these restructuring processes and the McKinseys and BCGs coming into big pharma, and how can we increase the decision making speed, etc. So that's an issue we don't have. We have a small management team, 4 or 5 people. We meet every week, twice. And we take decisions quickly. And if it's big decisions, obviously we have to align with our board and with our chairman, but most decisions we can take ourselves. So the agility is really a main advantage. On the other hand, in big pharma, you will have all the experts, right? You will have I remember when I developed my first diabetes drug, you had an expert for analytics, an expert for regulatory, an expert for toxicology, etc. We don't have that with 10 people. So we have to work with consultants, we have to work with CROs, and part of the magic is to find the right consultants and the right CROs that really bring the experience, the expertise to the table, that have the right tools, that work with the right quality. So that's a big difference as well. But the main thing, and that's why I probably could not go back to big pharma, is the agility and the speed in decision making, and I really enjoy that a lot, I have to say.
Yeah, maybe if we continue on this idea of what's exciting, then if you can look a little bit forward Maybe 10 years, 15 years, you said, is what it really takes from idea to fruition. Where do you see Vandria in that 10 or 15 years?
So what excites me is that we will see clinical data, not even in 10 to 15 years, but maybe in 2 or 3 years from Mission Mitochondria and Vandria. If you ask me about Vandria in 10 years, that's a long time for a biotech, right? So most biotechs won't get there. But our ambition is really to address unmet medical need. And in the best of worlds, and if I may dream a little bit, then we would bring this unique dual mode of action to patients with Alzheimer's disease and significantly slow down their progression. And if we treat them early enough, maybe keep them in a state that keeps them fully functional and enjoy life. For that, we would need a big pharma partner. We can't do this by ourselves. But there's another disease we're working on. It's called sporadic inclusion body myositis. It's the most frequent myopathy after the age of 50. It's a very rare disease, so we think that we can develop ourselves. So the dream is to maybe bring 2 medications to the market and help patients that need to live better and longer lives.
And finally, I guess a broader question for people who are really following along with this mitochondrial research. What sort of developments, what sort of breakthroughs should they be paying attention to? How can we separate the signal from the noise?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So yes, we need and will learn more about biomarkers to identify patients who can benefit better. There's also, we haven't had time to discuss, but there's also mitochondrial diseases, so disease states that are due to effect in mitochondrial DNA or mitochondrial proteins. But I think that, and you alluded to that, at the end, the proof is in the pudding, right? So you need the clinical data. So that's what really will be the make or break. Can we, with the mitochondrial approach, with the mitophagy approach, show in an appropriately designed clinical trial that patients benefit from that approach? That's, I think, what we need to look out for, and that's what I'm optimistic we and others will be able to demonstrate in hopefully just a few years.
Sounds good. Klaus Dugi, thanks for joining us on Beyond Biotech.
Thanks a lot for the interest.
That's it for this episode. Don't forget to check out all the latest news and analysis at Labiotech.eu. I hope wherever you are in the world, you have a great week ahead. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another Beyond Biotech.